We're breaking down the New York Giants draft class all this week on the Locked On Giants podcast. And up first to join us to talk about it is Coach Gene Clemons of Giants Country. He gives us his thoughts on the value, on the surprise picks, on the usage, and what the picks mean for the offense and defense. That's coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Happy Monday to everybody. We're a couple of days removed from the end of the 2023 draft, so we are going to be talking draft pretty much all week long. We're going to have different guests on the program to give their take on what the Giants did and what they didn't do, and what is still yet to come. And I can't think of a better way to kick the week off than with Giants Country's own Gene Clemons, Coach Gene Clemons, who joins us on the program. Gene, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Always good to, not just talk football with you, but talk, some new pieces and some pieces that I think that, Giants fans should be really excited about. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they pan out and getting a first look at them on rookie minicamp.
So, Gene, let's kick it off with your overall impression of what Joe Schoen did. I mean, he traded up a couple times, one spot in the first round to get cornerback Deonte Banks. Then he traded again in the third round to get Jalen Hyatt. Stayed put for John Michael Schmitz, a guy who I know I was pounding the table for. What do you think of the job this man has done?
I think overall this draft, in my opinion, is infinitely better than last year's draft. A lot of people, and I get it, you want to give people an opportunity to, grow into the position, or you want to give them an opportunity. But I am really critical when it comes to the draft, because I believe that you should get bona fide starters in the first 3 rounds of a draft. I believe they got bona fide starters in the first 3 rounds of this draft. I don't would I have traded up a space and given up a 5th and a 7th? Probably not, because I think that at the end of the day, you probably would have got the same dude. But if they had information that we're not privy to that said, we knew that they were dealing at 24, because when they traded with the Giants, they then traded again. So they were dealing at 24. So if you got to do that in order to get the guy that you really covet, what it tells me is that they were really, really high. They were really, really high on the corner. I didn't think he would be there at 24, to be honest with you. I thought he'd be gone by then. So I thought there would have been a couple of more guys gone. I actually was surprised there were only at that point in time 3 cornerbacks taken off the board. And so I think that worked out well. And it's why you saw cornerback go in the first round. Boom. You've got a guy that can be a starter right now. You go into the second round, you get an opportunity to get, in some people's estimation, the best center in the draft. Boom, you're good. I think that they did everything possible. They did everything possible to address the immediate needs of the team at that point in time. And so when you see that, and you see that they got starters, they didn't just get contributors or guys who might pan out. They got starters. And when you get starters, you have to be pleased with the outcome of the draft. I know, Lions fans were losing their minds about who the Lions took with their draft picks. And I'm like, but they got starters. Why are y'all already thinking about the second contract when they haven't played it down yet? They're starters. And so getting starters is never going to be a bad thing for me.
Now, Gene, when you look at the guys the Giants picked, probably you can make an argument that a lot of draft analysts, talent evaluators on the outside of the NFL bubble had these guys ranked a little bit higher than where they actually went. So where do you think the Giants got the best value in this draft?
Probably Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt was a guy who a lot of people thought not a lot of people thought. He's a first-round talent. If we're just talking about measurables, we're just talking about the height, speed, agility ratio. He's a 1%er of a 1%er. I love the tweet by Darius Slayton, who said, "I don't want to hear anybody talk about beating us in a 4x100 anymore. Like that talk is over." I wanted to tell Darius to slow down. Did they not see the guy that, a shame that they got in Miami, putting that dude with those dudes down there might have Miami just a little bit, but I would love to watch that race. That would be a fantastic race. They've got speed on speed on speed. You put Hyatt and you put Paris Campbell out there with Slayton. All three of those guys are legitimate sub 4 speed guys. And you put that level of speed, and then you add a Wan'Dale Robinson in, who is not as fast, but is extremely twitchy. You've got Saquon Barkley, who's explosive as anybody else out there. You've got the makings of a group of skill position guys who are really hard to handle for anybody in the league. So I think Jalen Hyatt, for where he went in the draft compared to where most people thought he would go in the draft, especially when there was that early run on wide receivers, when there was 4 wide receivers taken before the Giants. I came on when they selected corner. I said, "Oh, they passed up Jalen Hyatt, who was sitting there," because I thought that would be a natural, okay, this is a guy, but they must have knew something. And as that young man kept dropping, I was like, he's going to end up with the Giants at some point. I just had a feeling that was going to be the play that they went with, knowing who was out there to be taken. So value, I think that's where the value was.
And Jalen Hyatt, I think, put out a tweet or was on it. I saw a video clip where he said, "Blue looks good on me." And sure enough, he got his wish. So great pickup there by the Giants, who one of their objectives in the offseason was to add speed, not just on offense, but on the back end of the defense, where, cornerback was a big problem for the team last year. Beef up the run. That was a big problem last year. Stabilize the offensive line. That was, the interior of the offensive line was an issue last year. And let's talk about the offensive line, because the Giants were able to sit tight in the second round, get John Michael Schmitz, a guy who I was banging the table for. I was kind of surprised, though, that he wasn't the first center off the board. Joe Tippmann went off the board before him, and I believe Steve Avila, who can also play center, also went off the board before him. But in terms of pure centers, Schmitz was not the first guy off the board. But what did you think of that? Did that surprise you? And what does Schmitz bring to the table that maybe, they would have gotten with Tippmann had he been the pick?
Nothing surprises me when it comes to centers. I feel like with center, more than any other position, it's really just taste. Like, because I'm not just saying this just to say it. Now that everything is through, there are several centers in this draft class. People talked about the tight end class being deep, and I was like, it's deep, but I don't think there's any stars there. There are several guys in this draft at center that are all going to start next year. And so I think that with Tippmann, people were intrigued by the size of a center, because a lot of times you see centers, they're usually on the smaller side, 6'1", 6'2". You'll see a center. There were a lot of bigger centers in this draft, but Tippmann was clearly the biggest of all of them at 6'6", and some people had him listed at 6'7", but I think he was 6'6" at the combine. So, I think that there was people were intrigued by the size. I think what may have turned off people from Schmitz, and this is something that I wrote about, is the fact that he's finished, in my opinion. I don't think you're going to all of a sudden see him unlock another level of play physically. I think that he is who he is. He just spent 6 years in college. If you're not a finished product at 6 years in college, then you're probably not going to get any better in the NFL. He played 6 years in college. He played Big Ten football, that smash mouth football. I think he is who he is. And so maybe there were general managers and coaches that said, well, he may have the lowest ceiling of all of these guys, although his floor is so high. And so a guy who can come in and start for you right now, but where is he going? That might not be something that's in Smith's future. Maybe that's why he dropped. But overall, I think it just comes back to taste.
General question here. I mean, the Giants got richer. I think we can all agree. But in the meantime, Dallas added to their arsenal.
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia went crazy. I mean, Howie Roseman was at it again. Washington added. I think, at the end of last season, Joe Shane spoke about wanting to close the talent gap with Dallas and Philly. How much closer do you think the Giants got to accomplishing that? And, I still say Philly is the cream of the crop, but, I would think that they got a little closer to closing the gap. I know it's early. We haven't seen the deployment of all these players yet, but based on what we know about what the Giants did, what Dallas and Philly did, how much closer did the Giants close the gap?
I think closing the gap, definitely, but I think they closed the gap as far as your starters. I don't know how much they closed the gap with depth because there was nothing really wrong with Philly's defensive line. And then they just went out there and added two pieces that are not necessary. Neither one of them need to start. And yet they added those guys. They added premier level guys at defensive lineman or interior defensive line and at edge rusher. Like, that says a lot. And that's after some, and then they went out and got a 1% athlete to go at cornerback who could be a corner, could end up being a safety. Versatility is there. So when you talk about depth and what they were able to do, then they went on the offensive end and traded for DeAndre Swift, who is, a walking like home run waiting to happen, to add to a backfield of guys who are really more those like run you over, bowl you over. There's all the memes about it doesn't matter who Philly gets at running back, that because when they play the Giants, Boston Scott's going to run for 180 yards, and it's like he only ever does well versus the Giants. But they definitely have some talent. I thought that there was opportunities to bolster depth in some places, and the Giants took it. They went to the well twice. They went to the well twice at the cornerback. 3 times at the cornerback position in the draft. The last 2 guys that they drafted, defensive back. The last 2 guys they drafted both have positional flexibility. They've played corner, they've played safety. So I think what we're going to in the NFL is almost a positionless secondary, where guys have an ability to play anywhere. You know that the Giants like those guys who have some cornerback experience playing at the safety position, because look at the guys they have there. And so it'll be interesting to see how they employ those guys. You see all of the reserves that they brought in on the defensive line. They went heavy run stop in free agency and in the draft with the defensive line, which tells you they must feel good about their edge rushing depth, because they didn't really address that at all anywhere. So as far as closing the gap, yes, I still think that depth is going to be an issue in some places. I was surprised they didn't go out and get and procure a linebacker in the draft, but that's what happens when you sacrifice, 3 draft picks to move up. When you sacrifice 3 draft picks to move up, and you no longer have those, that extra 5th round pick, and you no longer have that extra 7th round pick or the extra 6th round pick. Now, you know what, you can only do so much. And I think they brought in some intriguing guys as undrafted free agents, but obviously that's a crapshoot, because sometimes those guys don't make your team just because you don't have room for them, not because they're not talented, but just because you're going to give priority to some other guys who may have already been in the fold. So closing the gap, yes, I'm not necessarily as worried about Dallas as I am Philadelphia. I don't think people should ever worry about the team that's not the first team, right? Like you need to worry about Philadelphia. The Eagles are a problem. What they did, that was a phenomenal draft. It's been especially because they lost so many pieces in free agency, and for them to be able to reload and put more like emphasis on things that they've already done well, I think that's a plus to them and what they were able to do. And I think that's what Joe Schoen is trying to build over here in New York, making sure that they have guys, they continue to restock the shelves before the shelves get empty.
Which is something that they didn't do in the past. And
absolutely,
case in point, the offensive line. How many times did they get caught, with their hand in the cookie jar, reaching for cookies that weren't there when it came to the offensive line? So
absolutely,
definitely
some definite swing and misses on the offensive line.
Yes,
will kill you, and we have to see. I know somebody tried to put me on the spot earlier on Twitter because they were talking about me being critical of Andrew Thomas in the first year. I don't know if I ever said that he should definitely move to guard, but I was like, he would be a monster at guard if he did, but we could say it. He was bad in his first year.
He was.
It's okay to just be honest about a performance.
Sure.
Like he wasn't good in his first year. He was much better in his second year. In his third year, he was lights out. Congratulations. If that makes me wrong about what I said at the beginning, then so be it. I was wrong, but I can only go off what I see. And what I saw at the time was a guy who was the fourth pick who needed to grow into a position. And you should not, in my opinion, you should not be drafting guys who need time to develop with a top 4 pick. Like that's just not what you should be doing. And that's why I was critical of Andrew Thomas. I'm going to be critical of Evan Neal until he shows me he can do what Andrew Thomas does. And if he does what Andrew Thomas does, then, hey, guess what? We're good. Yeah. If not, I'm going to say, maybe kick him inside and let him be big and strong and burly inside and get somebody else out there. But, that's what the draft is for. If you look back, there was, and I forget that I talk about him all the time because I really think it was a misstep on the Giants. He played tackle for the Giants. Then he went to Miami and played
Eric Flowers.
And I kept saying for the longest time, this dude's not a tackle. Stop playing him at tackle. He's not a tackle. And they kept on. He got labeled as a bust. He went somewhere else as a guard and played extremely well. And you're like, okay, like just because a guy doesn't work out at one position for you doesn't mean you throw your hands up. If there's a talent there, you want to repurpose the talent. That's what we're here for, right? If a guy can't play outside as a receiver, then you move him into the slot and see if he can be better at the slot. If he can't play corner, if you don't think Julian Love can play corner, guess what? Put him out there at safety and see what happens. That's how you build. That's how you figure out things. Like I think we're in a society where we simultaneously say we want you to be good right now, but then we want to also develop, but yet nobody's developing. And so I think from the standpoint of this regime, it's not only going to be important to draft what we believe are good players, but put them in positions to be able to grow. And if that's not what you originally thought they should do, then like change the game plan up. All right, he can't do this. What can he do? Let's put him in places to do the things that he can do. That's the genius of Bill Belichick. By not letting people do things they can't do, only asking them to do the things they can. This kid Price out of Oregon is not a pass rusher. I don't expect to ever see him on the field in any pass rushing situations. He is a run stopping nose guard. He's only going to be out there in obvious rundowns. If he's out there at all, he's going to be out there in obvious rundowns. They're not going to all of a sudden ask him to be a one gap penetrator in the passing game because he's never been a one drip, not even in high school. He's been a plugger forever. So I think that's what we need to see as far as the development of some of this young talent they have out there.
And of course, the Giants with a really good coaching staff who's smart enough to recognize, okay, maybe this guy is not a good fit here, so we'll try him here, as opposed
Absolutely.
to trying to jam a square peg into a round hole, which you can make an argument previous coaching staffs have done, which was
Yep.
very frustrating. So they, besides getting decent talent that can be developed, they've got the guys who can develop the talent. And that is the other part of the equation, which is so important. Hey, Giant fans, if you're like me and you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, then you got to try Built Bar or Built Puffs. These tasty treats are healthy and amazing, with each bar or puff covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like eating a candy bar, but without all the fat, carbs, and sugar. And with Built Bars and Built Puffs, you're getting a generous dose of protein every serving. We're talking on average 17 grams, with most bars boasting about 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar. And did you know that you don't have to wait anymore for your box to be shipped from built.com? Simply pop into your local Sam's Club or Walmart to pick up your box of assorted flavors and thank me later as you enjoy your special flavors from Built. Gene, I want to ask you about the day 3 picks because, I thought some good picks there. I loved the Eric Gray pick.
Mm-hmm.
I got to admit, I was a little like, I won't say perplexed because I know what they were trying to do. I guess maybe because I couldn't find a whole lot at the time on the sixth and 2 seventh round picks. What were your thoughts on the day 3 picks, and which guys do you really like of that batch?
So, I really think that Javarius Owens is a guy as a safety. He's a big, strong, athletic dude who clearly has something about him that makes coaches love him. He spent 4 years at Houston. He started all 4 years. He was a team captain, and yet when you look at the film, there were some things that he did, and you were like, ugh. Like, and my immediate question is, okay, why does he make those mistakes? Right? Is it schematic? Is it him trying to do too much? Is it sensory overload? Like, what is it? Why does he have these particular things that have clipped him up in every year as a first as a cornerback, then as a safety? Okay, why has the coaches continually stuck with them? This is Houston. This isn't like, this isn't Prairie View A&M. Like, they can find another safety. So, for Houston, a team that was on the cusp of breaking through to the big show to the college football playoff, a team that's been pushing for that level of relevance that people thought might have a chance to be a Big 12 team, for them to stick with a guy in this time over 2 different coaching staffs, and he was able to keep his job, it says a lot to me about what they think of him and what he brings to the table. Trey Hawkins is intriguing. Anytime a guy is a safety that converted to cornerback, I'm always interested. And he's 6'3". Like, he's a 6'3", 195-pound, well put together tackling machine, at cornerback. Is he going to play cornerback for the Giants? Most likely not. Could he play somewhere? Absolutely. Is he a guy who, if the Giants are trying to save a little bit of money, this is in your neck of the woods. Do they say goodbye to, some of their nickel guys who might be able to relieve a few $1 million here and there and go with one of these young, like, tweener cornerback safety guys that have the physicality to play in the slot, but then also the athleticism to be able to stick with people? Those are all the questions. But I think he's somebody who you look at and says, even if it's not right now, special teamer, project for the future. There's going to be a lot of questions going forward. There's guys whose contracts are coming up. We don't know how this thing is going to shake out going forward. And so adding that type of talent, I think, is always good. I'm still, and I like Eric Gray. But I'm just going to be honest with you. They had a chance to take a Deuce Vaughn. They had a chance to take a guy who could be a change of pace, difference type of guy. To me, Eric Gray is he's a Costco version of Saquon Barkley, right? And I don't mean that as a diss. And I hope that, he doesn't take it as a diss, but I mean, he's similarly built, not as big, same type of explosion, not as explosive, same type of in and out ability, but not as agile. Probably has maybe a little bit better hands than Saquon, which is saying a lot because Saquon's a legitimate receiver, but he's the same type of guy. So when you take Saquon out, you're just going to bring in another guy that's just like Saquon. So if Saquon's not having success, what's the change up? Just a fresh body? If you're telling me, hey, we just want a fresh body that does the exact same thing as Saquon does, then okay. But if you're saying, hey, I want somebody that's different, that gives us a different dynamic, does he give a different dynamic like a Jayshon Corbin does? Does he give a different dynamic? Like some of the other backs that were available out there would have given? I don't know. He's a solid dude. He didn't break in and become a starter to his senior year. That's always something that I wonder about when it comes to running back talent. Usually when you are the cream of the crop, you're on the field and you are a factor immediately. He was in a rotation with the with Tennessee for a couple of years before he moved over to Oklahoma. He sat behind people at Oklahoma before last year when he got his opportunity. But when he got his opportunity, he made the most of it, and he was definitely a guy who was a factor. So it's not that I don't like the pick. It's not that I think the pick was wrong. I think they needed to address and bring another running back in. I was just surprised that at that point, that's who they decided to bring in when there are a lot of running back options out there if you're going to go that late in the draft for one.
Yeah, it was a deep running back class for sure. Gene, I want to go back to receiver for a moment here because the Giants now have, I want to say 14 or 15 receivers under contract. All shapes, all sizes, all skill set. Based on what they have assembled, the collection they have assembled, what types of changes or wrinkles do you anticipate we will see in the offense moving forward, assuming, of course, these guys stay healthy and they work out?
Well, I think what we've seen, if you look at how many tight ends they're bringing in as undrafted free agents and as on rookie deals, the little rookie free agent deals, I think that we're going to see a lot of multiple tight end sets, which are going to allow receivers to play off the ball. Because outside of one guy, who's the X? Who's an X receiver on this team? Like there's no real legitimate X guy. And so that tells me that they are envisioning an offense with their guys that are receivers are all move guys. They're all guys that they come in motion. We know that Dable likes motion in an offense, but they're going to be guys that come in motion. You're going to have tight ends that are flexed that there'll be a motion and all of a sudden they're the outside guy because the outside guy motioned in and became like a wing or went to the other side. I think you're going to see some different looking formations that allow these guys who are fast, but not necessarily the best at getting off press coverage to just be able to get free releases and take off and really put stress on the third level. And allow those guys like your Wan'Dale Robinsons and all of these tight ends to work underneath and be able to get out and do things. So I think what it says is, we really want to have competition. I don't think a guy like Darius Slayton can afford to have another bad camp. Like, even though we saw what he did when he was given the opportunity, some could just argue it away and go, well, he was the only one there, so they had to roll with him. I don't think he's going to have the luxury of having a bad camp. He's going to have to come out and establish himself and do the things necessary to be impressive in camp in order to make the team, because there's going to be so many different options, so many different ways to go. But there are no real legitimate X receivers on this team. There's maybe one. And
I'm guessing Hodgins would be the guy.
He's the guy who you would say it most likely is, but I don't even think he's really a true X. And
maybe
so like
Johnson?
Maybe Johnson, but you're talking about guys who haven't even proven anything in the NFL. Right. There's no, and if we're being honest about it, if you've got all of these guys on your team and Colin Johnson is shaken out of the fold, then somebody in the scouting department missed something somewhere. Like if you added all of these receivers and then you drafted this receiver and you've got all of these guys coming back, and when you do the sifter, Colin Johnson is still sitting there, then somebody in the scouting department missed something. Because I'm just counting in my head right now the guys who were there last year, and I'm saying, where does Colin Johnson fit in at? Like, where is his place if they're going to keep 7 to 8 wide receivers, on an active roster? Like, where is Colin Johnson, fitting? Because I think they're going to keep 3 tight ends. Some of these undrafted free agent tight ends they brought in, these guys have a lot of talent. Like I thought that they were going to take another tight end. I really wanted them to take the guy from Bethune-Cookman, because he's just a big, super athletic guy. He almost reminds me of Waller in the sense of he still needs to figure it out as like playing a position, but he has all of the size and the athleticism in the world. But they have some other guys out there. They got the one guy. Oh gosh, off the top of my head right now, if I had the list in front of me, but he transferred from Oklahoma, where he was a defensive back. He was a defensive back recruit out of high school. Transferred, went to was it OD? It wasn't ODU. Went to ECU, went to East Carolina. And at East Carolina, in the 2 seasons where he was essentially learning how to play tight end, almost caught 1,000 yards in passes and had 10 touchdowns. Like that level of production. It wasn't like he went down to like a D2 and did it. He went to an American Athletic Conference team with really good competition, and he was able to perform at a position he's only been playing for 2 years. So like you look at those types of guys and you say, man, there's a lot of meat on the bone when it comes to the tight end position. And I think the reason that we see so many of these tight ends being brought in is because they're planning to play a lot of tight ends. And if they weren't planning to play a lot of tight ends, I don't think you would see them. And so whether they end up on the active roster or whether they end up just as like as camp bodies or as somebody that they stuff away on the practice squad, I think it's worth noting the type of people that they're bringing in for these workouts with the rookies, because I think it gives you an insight into what type of offense/defense they want it to be. A lot of tight ends brought in. And by the way, Ryan Jones, that's his name. Ryan Jones. He's really 6'3", 150. Like he's a guy who clearly is more like an H-back move tight end dude, but a lot of production at tight end for a guy who just started playing tight end yesterday, so.
And to your point, I'm going to make a bold prediction right now. And maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm not, but going into this draft, I thought that perhaps Joe Schoen would look to trade for future assets in next year's draft because they don't have any, or they're not projected, I should say, to get any comp picks. I could conceivably see, to your point about, planning to play a lot more tight ends, and maybe that means keeping one less receiver. If these guys really ball out in the summer, I could see the Giants potentially looking to trade one of those wide receivers for future draft assets. That would not surprise me in the least.
No, absolutely not. Like you can't play them all. That's the thing, is you can't play them. You can't play them all. And this isn't hockey. You can't just platoon them in, and there's a rhythm. If you were platooning in a quarterback, then you could platoon them in, but you're not platooning in a quarterback. And so the rhythm that your starting quarterback has with the first unit receivers, they need to be getting the majority of the time with those first team receivers. And so when you bring in a second team guy and a third team guy, there's a curve. They don't run the hitch the same way. I know it looks like the same hitch to everybody else, but every wide receiver runs a hitch a little bit different. And that quarterback needs to know how you run that hitch compared to your homeboy, and seeing how that works and what's going to be best. So to have all of these wide receivers right now, you've traded for a tight end that's clearly going to be on the field. You have a tight end that you took in the draft last year that was your starting tight end. Clearly, he's going to get some burn, some tick, right? You have Slayton. Is he still there? Cool. You brought in Paris Campbell. Is he still there? Cool, right? So those are two more guys who are guys who you probably are saying they're definitely going to play. Wan'Dale Robinson, before he got hurt, seemed as if he was starting to find his footing. So is he a guy that's going to be relied upon? That's three receivers right there. And that's before I get to Isaiah Hodgins, who came on the scene. And in the second half of the season, you could argue was the Giants' best receiver, not named Slayton. So like where are these other guys going to play at? Like, what are they going to do? You brought in Hyatt. How does Hyatt work into the fold? That speed's going to get on the field some way. Unless he all of a sudden gets the dropsies and he can't catch, which has never been a knock on him. He's going to play somewhere. Now I'm already up to 5 receivers, PT. Like, where are these guys? Where are all these other guys going to play? Like, it's going to be a great battle maybe this is what they wanted. Big battle in the receiving core, big battle in the secondary. It's going to be, I think it's going to be one of the most intriguing things to watch as we go through the summertime. How are these wide receivers going to shake out? Who's playing where? And how are these cornerbacks and safeties going to shake out outside of Zay, who we know where he's going to be, who he is. There's questions about everyone else, including Jackson. We just saw what they did with a guy who was a Pro Bowler for him. Do we really think Jackson's like safe? Like, can we really honestly say that Jackson's going to be a starting cornerback for us next year? Just based off of what we've seen and how this and how this team has rolled. They played a lot of football last year without him. So they know what life without him looks like. Right. So if these young guys come on and these guys who they brought in free agency come on, they might say, "Hey, Adoree, you're actually more valuable to us as a trade asset." And it might be cornerback where you see a trade happen instead of wide receiver, or it might be both.
I am pretty sure there's going to be some attempt to trade somebody because, like I said, Shane likes to have those extra assets so that he can move around. And right now he is not projected to get them. And the comp pick formula window closes, I believe, on Tuesday. It's usually the first Tuesday after the draft. So time is ticking away. And I just don't think they're going to catch up because they've signed more than what they've actually lost. Matter of fact, we'll probably see a bunch of signings start to happen once that deadline comes up, because that means now teams aren't going to get dinged or it's not going to cost them a chance at a comp pick. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. But excuse me, in the case of the Giants, they got to straighten out their cap, which is right now is in the red across the board. That's another topic for another day, though. Yeah,
that's what they do, though. These gymnastics with the cap, they're done all over the place. They'll figure it out. I'll let the people who really want to dive into the cap stuff.
I can address that.
For me, I just go, something must be iffy about this cap, because New Orleans keeps signing people and keeps, they keep brand new people coming in the fold, and every year they're like $100 million over the cap. So like, they're able to figure it out all the time. Everybody and their mother told us that the Baltimore Ravens had to sign Lamar Jackson first in order to make their offseason happen. They did all of their offseason and came in the 11th hour, signed Lamar Jackson, didn't hurt anything. So clearly, these caps have a nice way of being manipulated to a team's will, and I'm sure that this front office is talented enough to figure it out. So I don't even worry about it. I let them worry about it. Just give me players.
Yeah,
like, that's that. But if I was the coach in there, I was like, listen, Joe, I don't even care how you get it done. Just get it done. Like, that's it. I don't care. I need a tight end. Get me a tight end. I need a receiver. Get me a receiver. I need a middle linebacker. Get me a middle linebacker. Guess what? They've got a tight end. They've got a receiver. They've got a middle linebacker. They've got another safety. They've got a cornerback. Like, all of the things that you wanted, they've addressed the interior defensive line. I'm surprised. I'm still surprised they didn't go back in with linebacker. I'm still shocked.
I'm not as surprised, believe it or not.
I'm still surprised. If they're planning to play dime a lot this year, then maybe that's why they went so heavy on the defensive line, to ensure that it wasn't going to be a lot of guys running up to the second level. Because if you're asking them to play one linebacker a predominant amount of times, like, that's a recipe to get people banged up if he's got to take on guards, and tackles climbing to the second level all day. But I think maybe that's what their thought process was with bringing in all of these different defensive linemen, was to make sure that they had enough beef up front that they never left their middle linebacker exposed. And if that's the case, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think that could be. I mean, because I wasn't surprised that they added more linebacker. I thought that maybe they thought they had enough. And quite honestly, how often are they in their base defense to where they have to have, two inside linebackers on the field all the time?
Yeah, but like we said last time we talked, the reason they weren't in that base defense a lot
they didn't have
base defense was terrible. Like,
right.
They were a sieve. So you would hope they would want to improve that. Right. But what it tells me is they must really like the progress that Beavers has made in the offseason, getting back healthy. They probably think that he's going to be a guy who can settle into that other linebacker position. You've got your 3-down linebacker in Okereke. You can have your run stuffing linebacker with Beavers, and then you have some other options of guys that are athletic enough if you wanted to bring a second linebacker on the field on third down. But most likely it's going to be a safety that they're bringing out there at that point.
Could very well be. So we're going to find out soon enough. Rookie minicamp coming up on Friday and Saturday. And I'm going to be at the rookie minicamp both days, obviously. Meanwhile, the rest of the week, folks, we're just going to bring on more guests to get their take. I'm going to see if I can get some of our college hosts to come on to talk more about the draft pick. Gene, I want to thank you for coming on with me, spending time. It's always great to talk ball with you. I really enjoy it. We will do it again at some point down the line.
Before I get out of here, one guy I want Giants fans to keep an eye on, who got signed during this undrafted free agent period. Bryce Ford Wheaton. If you've go back and look at one of my, I think it was on my receivers depth article that I did, that I mentioned Bryce Ford Wheaton and his ability to be an X receiver. He's a guy who is a legitimate 6'4", 220-something pound receiver with hands, who has an ability to move, speed. He played in West Virginia, which means he played in an offense where the ball was thrown around. I think he could be a guy who, if he comes out of nowhere and all of a sudden he looks impressive, don't be surprised. That's all I'll say.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, listen, we at this time of year, sleepers, people are interested in all this stuff. So we'll see who turns out to be the real deal, the keepers, and who doesn't. And of course, over on Giants Country, we're going to start our 90-man roster preview coming up probably in a couple weeks or so. So you'll want to check that out. And again, Gene, you and I will probably reconvene at some point before training camp. to talk about where this roster's headed once we, see what the 90-man roster looks like. And also, whatever clues we get from the mini camps, from the OTAs and that sort of thing. So thank you again, my friend, for coming on. Giant fans, thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Special shout out to my everydayers. If you're an everydayer, let me know so I can give you a shout out in person on the next podcast. For Gene Clemons, I'm Patricia Traina. Thank you, Giant fans. We will see you tomorrow.